Welcome to Addicted to Murder. This is Courtney, licensed professional counselor with over a decade of experience.
And this is Trisha, and our killer, I imagine, had Cyapodus socks.
Cyapodus socks.
Cyapodus.
Giant?
Yeah.
Oh.
Oversized feet around a size 13.
Oh. I imagine so.
Yeah.
Well,
What made you think that was giant? What's a word in there that, or did we do this word before?
we haven't done that word. I was just thinking of the traits I know about our killer and knew that he was a
Big dude.
big dude.
You were using logic.
I was.
And not a root word.
Nope. I don't. That was never my thing.
Yeah, mine either. Spelling bees, nope. Just ask the people I work with. So we are going to be doing, before we start, I will ask a question, but since we just talked about his big old feet, Keith Hunter Jesperson, a.k.a. the Smiley Face Killer.
Woohoo.
Which there is a show about on Netflix? Whatever.
Hulu, I think.
Hulu. Right now with, what's his name? Dennis Quaid.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's more about his daughter.
Yeah.
Which is really good, by the way. I watched it, and I highly recommend it.
I've watched the first few episodes. Yeah. I'm enjoying it. But before that, my question, Courtney, is an easy one. As I look at this wonderful painting I did of the Eiffel Tower in France, what European country that you have not been to do you want to go to the most?
Oh.
It can be Eastern, Western, whatever.
That's hard, because I want to go to a lot of them, but probably Italy, I think, would be my first choice.
What is a specific city or landmark?
I kind of want to see, like, all the different parts of it, right? There's, like, the southern coast with all, like, the seafood. Let's be real, it's mostly about the food. But, like, the southern coast, and then I'd love to see, like, Venice, and then, like, Milan, and go up to, like, the northern part of Italy, up towards the mountains. Like,
Yeah.
It just seems like a really cool, varied place.
If we have Spanish and Italian listeners, they're going to be, like, pissed. How can you mix up our countries? But one of my aunts and uncles, it's either Italy or Spain that they have fallen in love with, and they have a particular region they go that's on the coast, and it's just amazing. I wouldn't be surprised if they bought a piece of property there at some point, but
Well,
for the
when
life
they
of me,
do,
I can't remember.
Regardless of which
apologize.
country it is,
Yeah,
when they do buy a piece of property, let me know if I can timeshare there or
yeah,
something.
totally. I mean, they're not going to be living there, I don't think.
Right.
How
about you?
I want to go to Greece.
Greece is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's on, like, we're saving for it, so we will be going in the next 2 years. Where in Greece? I don't know. I want to go somewhere awesome. That's all. I've been watching, like, John Levy has a show called The Reluctant Traveler. John Levy, is that his name? Why am I brain farting? David Levy's dad. Schitt's Creek. Eugene. Oh my gosh. Whatever. He has a funny show called The Reluctant Traveler, and he just did one on Greece, and it was like, I learned a lot. And the food as well. I love Greek food. Mediterranean food's the bomb.
Yes. Greece is really cool. I would be really interested to see what it's like now. I went to Greece back when I was at college. So 15 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And I was on, like, a guided tour with people from my school, so I didn't get to explore as much as I think would have been fun, but I really enjoyed it there.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks beautiful. The water looks beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was our question.
Cool.
Easy one.
Back to doing things normally.
Yeah, so anyways, we're back to our regular format. That means I typed up the script and all of its inconsistencies and incorrections. So
I corrected some of those.
there we go. You and Grammarly. Those are what I use. So Keith Hunter Jesperson was born April 6th, 1955 in Chilliwack, British Columbia. He would later be known as the Happy Face Killer. His dad's name was Les, and his mother was Gladys. He had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and little Keith landed right in the middle of all of that. So definite middle child there. His father was an alcoholic who worked, ate, and then drank himself to sleep. Les quit school, his dad, in the 10th grade, and learned how to weld, plumb, blacksmith. He taught himself Morse code and a whole lot of other stuff. By the way, the book that we're using where I got this information is called the letter I, The Creation of a Serial Killer by Jack Olson. So anyways, it sounds like Les was like very, very smart. He basically taught himself how to be an engineer. So about his father, Keith would later say, quote, "He was too pickled to stay up late and read to us or help with our homework. He worked our asses off. Sunday was a work day. If we laid in bed 10 minutes too late, we got the belt." So basically, Les was a physically abusive alcoholic. He would do things like tell the kids to pee on or touch the electric fence, kind of for fun. So the kids would do that, and then they get shocked, and then he would laugh at them. And Keith would say that he both loved and hated his dad. He felt that his dad was good at everything, and he was really good at making friends. So he must have been charming when he wanted to be. But it sounds like in the household, he made all the decisions. And he never did anything that didn't benefit him in some way. So he wouldn't go to the children's school functions because it didn't make him any money. If anything, it took him away from making money. He wouldn't take his wife to Hawaii or Alaska because he didn't want to go. Therefore, they weren't going to go. And he made those rules. He was not a religious man. And he never missed a day of work, no matter how many medical problems he incurred. Including one time he coughed so hard that he broke 3 ribs from all the cigarettes he smoked. It appeared that he looked down on females, claiming he only stayed with his wife because she was a good cook. Courtney, what are your thoughts so far?
Well, it sounds like at the very least, Les is a selfish and mean person, and at the very most, could be narcissistic and antisocial. Either way, what his behavior was modeling for his children is that men are in charge, violence is okay or even glorified, and that consequences don't matter as long as you get what you want in the end.
Okay, well. Gladys, on the other hand, she came from a very religious family, Protestants who were against any kind of alcohol consumption, so very much different from the man she married. In fact, they said that somebody came on their property at Christmas time with a bottle of Christmas cheer, and they promptly turned them away and made them leave. So
intense.
Yeah. Gladys favored her 2 daughters of the 5 children, and Les favored his other 2 sons, not Keith. So Keith, though, was favored by his maternal grandparents. Grandma Marjorie said, quote, "I always had a heart for Keith because he was the one that got left out." Gladys was brought up in a very puritanical household. She was not even permitted to see the farm animals mating, and she was a farmer. They all generations of farmers on her side. It was noted that her parents never touched each other in public. Her children claimed that their father made all the money, but Gladys did everything else. Her children reflected that she was, quote, "Dad's slave." So Gladys was nearly 6 foot tall. She was a big woman who did what she could to help her kids out, including like interfering when she could when Les would be beating them. But if he was drunk, there was nothing she could do. She would eventually develop cancer and have to wear wigs, and she was very private about all of that stuff. She wanted to be as proper and perfect looking as she could be. So yeah. So, Courtney, any thoughts there?
So there were some very traditional gender roles being acted out in this household, right? Dad is the breadwinner and the focus is on working, while mom is the caretaker of the house and kids, and her efforts are not valued, at least not by her husband. I do kind of wonder how Gladys's size, being 6 feet tall, and, kind of her eventual hair loss and cancer impacted her place in the marriage. Just kind of thinking that these both traits are not considered traditionally feminine. So you read the book more.
Yeah, I'm not through it all the way, but are you meaning do you think he stepped out?
Or just didn't give her positive attention, or
the only thing
maybe was meaner to her. I don't know.
The only thing that I can recall reading in that regard was that it was overheard. I think Keith overheard it. Him asking her, why don't you dress more sexy for me? And her that's not really how she was raised. This is just sunscreen coming off, not my skin. I'm sorry, I'm rubbing like my shoulders. And I made myself some homemade zinc sunscreen, and it's very thick, and it looks like my skin is coming off, but it is not.
I just assumed that you'd been sunburned and were peeling a little.
No, it's sunscreen.
That's what my arm would be if I was sunburned right now.
No, I made some homemade sunscreen that has bug repellent in it, or like bug essential oils, and I put some beeswax in it to make it waterproof.
Oh.
It's about a 20, 25 SPF, so you still get a little bit of sun through it. But anyhow,
it's a nice little detour.
Yeah, so yeah, maybe someday we'll go into a side business. Keith came to be known as the, quote, slowest of all the kids. He was an obedient and quiet boy, but was very distractible. An example would be when the family would go for a hike. Keith was always like 20 feet behind everyone else, staring at the trees or the sky, seeming like he was lost in his own world. He would inevitably get lost on any outing they went on. He was uncoordinated, he was slow, he was big. He was bored by most games, but he did excel at one game. It was cribbage. He learned that game before he could even read, and I guess he was very good at it.
Oh, you love cribbage.
I do love cribbage, and that involves math and a little bit of strategy.
Yes.
So, I mean, learned that before he could read, but we will see that he did not learn to read later. The kids grew up in rural areas, starting in Chilliwack, British Columbia, like I said. Then they ended up moving to Sella, Washington. Have you heard of that?
I have.
Okay.
I actually might have some distant relatives that live there.
Well, what do you know? Mm-hmm. So they always had horses and other farm animals. So this was a farming family. Keith was always a shy boy, and he liked to play by himself. He would dig in the dirt. He would build himself forts. He would fish by himself, and he seemed happy. His mother said, quote, he can sit in one spot all by himself. You come back an hour later, and he's still right there. Courtney, does that sound normal?
It's not necessarily abnormal. I mean, many kids are more introverted and are perfectly happy doing individual activities. And, daydreaming and imagination and creativity can all be really positive things. At the time, however, there was, less acceptance of differences. And so it probably could have been concerning or seemed odd to his parents. Like, those were not things that, like, introversion and solitude and things weren't necessarily, like, rambunctious boy things.
Yeah.
When you think of children. But also there is a point at which daydreaming can become a problem. Mm-hmm. Maladaptive daydreaming is a term that's used to describe when someone sort of retreats into their imagination, like creating whole worlds there, and then they choose to kind of spend more time there in the world they created in their mind than in reality. And this is often kind of a means of escape from, like, challenging emotions or from, like, traumatic experiences.
What's the difference between maladaptive daydreaming and dissociation?
It's a decision. So, you choose to go into your
dissociation's just
it just happens.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Keith had this to say, quote, I never really felt at home in our house, so I fantasized. In those days, we called it daydreaming. I pretended to be a miner or a heavy equipment operator. He recalled that when his dad was gone, his home was peaceful, but when his dad was there, it was very tense. Keith seemed to idolize his father, even if he was terrified of him. As long as he did what he was supposed to do, his dad would make him feel special, but the rules were always strict. Quote, we'd be riding along in his pickup, and I'd be holding his rye and Coke for him, and he'd say something like, you spill one goddamn drop and you're no son of mine. Les would use his belt on his kids a lot. He said later in an interview, quote, this was Les, all my children got it. When I was a kid, I was strapped harder than any of them, and I didn't grow up to be a serial killer. I mean, he's got a point. But Courtney, thoughts so far?
I mean, generational trauma is very real. This is a great example. And, Les's words, it's a very common missive from older generations to justify the use of physical hurt as punishment on their own children.
Sure. I've heard that in my own family, No, not like my dad, but like his dad and his dad. And
look how I turned out. I'm fine. It's like, no, you're probably, you're an abusive alcoholic who beats your kids.
Yeah, unless the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But it might not have been called physical abuse back then.
No, it was just corporal punishment.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we discussed this before or not, but I did a pretty in-depth paper recently, and through my research, I discovered that of all of the ACEs, or the adverse childhood experiences, physical abuse was the most associated with later development of sociopathy. So don't get me wrong, like all forms of abuse had some sort of correlation with an increased risk of like ASPD, but physical abuse stood out in study after study as the most common factor. So just saying, if that holds true, yeah, he's definitely got the physical abuse going on.
Right.
Keith's best friend was his dog Duke, whom he got when he was 5 years old. Duke slept in a bed with him, and he reflected that when he was an adult, Keith would still sleep in the fetal position because he was, quote, still making room for Duke in his bed.
Aww.
They were constant companions. Duke did not let Keith out of his sight, and Keith would play with him all day. He would hunt with him, fish with him, work on the farm, and of course, feed Duke scraps. Keith did make a human friend when he was about 6 years old, a boy named Joe Smoker. The two of them did a lot of poaching together and then sold their catch for money. His dad didn't mind the poaching, but he would get pissed off if they got caught poaching. He was some kind of city official at this point, Les, and it humiliated him when any of his kids got in trouble. The poaching led to the killing of animals, not for food, however, and as a family, like Les and the boys, they would kill muskrats and hundreds of gophers. Keith reflected on films of them covered in blood from killing the, quote, pests. He was gifted a BB gun and a slingshot. He was not supposed to hit people, but he did anyway. He shot one neighbor's penis while he was peeing outside with his BB gun, and he hit his overweight neighbor when she was bent over. His dad thought that was funny, so he gave him only a light spanking for that one. Courtney?
Well, this type of hunting for food or sport, right, was very normal for young boys during this time when Keith was growing up. And obviously it was encouraged by his family. The animals he killed, in a way, worked to desensitize Keith to the concepts of pain and death. He did not have any qualms about killing an animal, at least not one of these animals that were, quote, bad animals, right? And as shown by his choice to shoot at people for fun, did not have a whole lot of empathy for the pain of other people either.
Well, and then it was just kind of reinforced when his dad, that the large lady walked Keith over to tell on him, and I guess she was like walking really funny.
Because she'd just been shot with a BB gun?
Well, she was shot with a slingshot, but it was still, it was whatever, and then, he laughed at it, so.
Right.
He made his dad laugh, probably made him feel good. Keith's main adult in his life that he could actually talk to was his maternal grandfather, Roy. So it sounds like his mom's parents were really positive figures in his life, the only ones that liked him the best. They would fish together and they talked about everything. Keith has remarked that maybe things would have turned out differently if his grandfather had lived longer, and unfortunately he died when Keith was 9, and it was the only funeral he had ever cried at. Keith had a frenemy named Martin, and Martin always would do bad things and blame them on Keith, and then Keith would get beaten in front of everyone for the things Martin did. One day, Keith had had enough and started to pummel Martin, threatening to kill him and thinking he might have actually done so, but he was pulled off. Of this incident, Keith says, quote, "That's when I began to think of myself as two people, one watching the other. When I was kicking Martin's ass, a gentler part of me stood by and watched. I can honestly say that the person that beat Martin was not the real me." What are your thoughts, Courtney?
It sounds like Keith may have been dissociating during this fight. I imagine he had a lot of internalized rage and trauma from his own physical abuse, and that this was sort of just triggered and then acted out towards Martin.
When Keith was 7, he got impetigo and pneumonia at the same time. So impetigo is a very contagious bacterial skin infection. Sometimes you get red sores and blisters that can ooze and make like a yellow crust on your skin. I think it was on his face. I imagine he was terrifying looking and he was probably miserable. And he was in his room for a long time by himself. Apparently, like when he came out of his quarantine, his siblings had done something nice for him. I think made like a little lean-to or something for him, and it was the only time he ever remembered them doing something nice for him. I don't know. Took like an awful illness. Keith claims that animals were more his family than his family was, or rather seemed more real to him. He says that he lived in what he called, quote, Keith's world. Quote, I was always treated different, and this was my solution. On top of everything, he and one of his brothers had the same birthday. Yay. So the parties were technically joint parties, but it always seemed like his brother was more of the focus and most likely was more outgoing and therefore got more of the attention.
Right. Joint parties are the worst. Parents, don't do it.
Yeah, just maybe do it on 2 separate days or, yeah. When he started elementary school, he was immediately teased for being so big. He didn't talk back to the trolls because he thought he would get in trouble. And he didn't want to get in trouble at home, right? Because then he would get the belt. So it appears that he didn't quite understand what writing was when he was in school. He would fill up his books with like squiggly lines and circles and hand them to the teacher, expecting them to understand what he was trying to write. But instead, they made an example of what not to do by berating him in front of the class. So his grades were pretty low in the first years of school, and there was talk of holding him back. He would get beaten for his grades. So he was constantly living in fear of being beaten, like taking his report cards home because he was not improving. That all changed when someone realized how nearsighted Keith was. He couldn't read the blackboard, but he thought that it was what he was saying was normal. So he didn't realize he couldn't read the blackboard. No wonder he couldn't learn how to read. Couldn't see what was being done. And he thought everyone saw just like him. So just let this be, get your kids' eyes checked out if you can. I mean, I know not everyone has eye insurance, but at school they a lot of times do those screenings. At least do that. So he got his glasses. His grades did improve, but he never totally caught back up. What do you think, Courtney?
I mean, this reminds me so much of a kiddo that I actually used to work with. He was in 3rd grade at the time and seemed to really struggle with reading to the point that he was repeatedly just given like kindergarten level work and assignments. And then he would refuse to do them because he's like, I'm not a kindergartner. And then he'd have these big behaviors about it. And then his eyesight was tested and he got glasses. And immediately his reading improved. And as he was given more age-appropriate tasks, his behavior stopped altogether. Right? So, it's hard to tell the difference between different letters when they all look like blurry blobs.
Right. Something so simple.
Right. Changed his whole life.
Mm-hmm. He grew fast, and his coordination did not seem to develop at the same pace. So he walked very distinctly, and he constantly was falling off the horses at home. And so he was still getting punished at home all the time, but he was also getting punished at school. They used something called the beaver tail, and they would hit the kids 3 times on each palm. That would swell up, and then they would hit them 3 more times on the palm. They would wait and then force their hands under cold water, which would be more painful than being hit. Keith, too, told a few other stories about, other ways that they were punished at school, but I won't get into them. Anyways, what do you think about? I mean, I know corporal punishment was a thing.
Right.
I mean, when they decided, I don't even know when they decided to stop doing it. Thank goodness they did.
I feel like in some places corporal punishment was still allowed all the way up through like the 90s. Like in some states, like you could get like spanked with a paddle and stuff at school.
I mean, getting cropped on the hands, like then you can't do your work.
Right, because then your hands hurt.
Yeah.
You can't like hold a pencil.
Yeah.
Like.
Maybe it was just a way so they could punish them more. It's like some sick, sadistic shit going on with these teachers. Right.
Well, I think, there's an understanding that was misguided, right? That spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah.
That clearly was not helpful.
No. So he would get punished at school, get punished at work, or at home. He was just always getting physically beaten. Yeah. Into adolescence, Keith still mostly considered animals his friends. He even splintered a broken wing of a raven and put it into a nest to heal. but one of his brothers took the wounded bird and threw it to the ground and threw knives at it until it died. This prompted Keith to go to his brother's room and throw out all his model planes and cars. His mom actually accidentally drove over them. So, but Keith, of course, got in trouble for his brother's toys, but his brother did not get in trouble for killing his wounded bird. Courtney?
Well, clearly, Keith was not the only child in this family who was impacted by their upbringing. His brother killing the bird in such a violent and careless way is horrible. And, I can understand Keith's reaction of wanting to break the things his brother cared about, too. Him being punished repeatedly at home and school likely impacted his self-esteem and self-worth. I imagine that he didn't feel like his feelings mattered very much.
I don't think they did.
Right, at least not to the people that it mattered to.
Maybe to his grandparents. So this is a trigger warning. We're going to talk a little about more animal cruelty. So this was a real struggle for me to read this part of the book. Keith's dad did not like cats, and therefore neither did Keith. He's following Dad's example. They would control, quote, the feral cat population on the farm, which included kittens, in various means. He also killed garter snakes. He enjoyed torturing them with gardening tools. And then Keith fell into a group of boys who also enjoyed torturing animals. They would blow up birds with firecrackers. They'd force feed Alka-Seltzer to seagulls and do horrible things to cats that I will not describe. It was so bad that Keith realized he needed to leave his dog at home in case the bloodlust led to, let's do something to Duke. But besides Duke, it seemed at this point that he enjoyed torturing a multitude of animals. There are many other disturbing tales of what these boys did, but like I said, I'm not going to burden you, the listener, with that because it's awful. Courtney, he spent so much of his life claiming that animals were his family. I mean, I know that he had the thing with the gophers and whatever, but why do you think he is now actively torturing animals and not just the pests as he had done on the farm?
I believe that at least some of this change is related to his trying to fit in. He wanted to be loved and accepted by his father, so he helped with the cat problem. And then as he got older, he wanted to have friends and fit in with these boys, and being already desensitized to violence against animals, this likely felt maybe like an easy way to gain their acceptance.
I wonder if, when it's all said and done, the only animals he gave a shit about was dogs.
I mean, maybe, but I guess I didn't read about if there was ever harm done to the farm animals, like the horses, or anything like that.
It was other people's animals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or wild animals. Yeah.
Yeah, and there also is, there's some truth to the idea of mob mentality, where once things get going,
sure,
people will do something in a group that they would never do on their own.
That's never happened in America, capital. Keith ran away from a situation that his friend did not. Suffice it to say, his friend was assaulted by an older neighbor, a man, and sexually assaulted. And the man wanted Keith to stay, and Keith was like, no. I think the guy dropped his pants and Keith was out. But his friend unfortunately was sexually assaulted and told Keith what happened, and Keith was disgusted by what happened. And he always wondered how the man got that way. It's not that Keith, it's just kind of ironic, I guess. We're studying how Keith got this way, and he
right.
How did this guy get this way? Well, Keith also was nearly drowned by a bully in his neighborhood at Cultus Lake, which is in Oregon. And to get him to get the bully to leave him alone after this happened, they were at the pool, a neighborhood pool, and Keith decided to drown the bully. And he got pretty close to doing so, but the lifeguard pulled him off. But he had intended to drown this bully. Mm-hmm. So, where do you think we're at diagnosis-wise with Keith now? He's still a preteen.
Yeah, so I think we're rounding the corners into conduct disorder a little bit.
Yeah.
right? There's some physical violence towards others, cruelty to animals.
I mean, he did break the law. I mean, it was poaching and
Right.
stuff like that. Well, you'll probably have a more concrete thing to say after we talk about this, because then he is also into fire. Okay, so he really enjoyed fire. It started with just campfires and, accidentally throwing in a hairspray can that might blow up, or a lighter, anything that would go boom. He liked to burn bugs and hear them pop. He and Joe Smoker liked to shoot fireworks at each other because that's fun. They caught a car on fire while doing that, but were able to put it out. Fun aside, my friend's Jeep, one year during 4th of July, someone was doing a mortar on the yard or the street her Jeep was parked on, and the tube tipped over and the mortar shot under her Jeep and blew up. Oh. And blew a hole in her floor, and the whole Jeep was just covered in ashes and everything. And those things are powerful. I'm assuming they weren't shooting mortars at each other, but
right.
Be careful.
Fireworks are scary.
Yeah. Anyhow, so they accidentally caught a car on fire, but they were able to put that out. But they accidentally, quote, set fire to an empty house, and they were not able to put it out. So this house was abandoned and was like a tinderbox and burnt to the ground very quickly. Neighbors saw the two boys run out of the house and told on them. So, of course, he was punished by his dad, and he had to pay his life savings to the neighbor, which was around $50. The neighbor was able to collect insurance money, so he was actually happy the place burnt down. But Keith was pissed because he did not give back his money. So Keith was able to make that money because he had been working, as soon as he was able to. He was a paper boy when he turned 11, and apparently he was a great paper boy. And he did, in 5th grade, make friends with a seemingly normal boy who didn't enjoy torturing animals. And they hung out a lot, and they fished, and they hunted, and they flirted with girls, and they enjoyed each other's company. And, things seemed to be looking up for the awkward Keith. But then, unfortunately, Les announced that the family would be moving out of the country. So, Courtney, that's where I'm going to stop. So, what do you got to say? Do you want to firm up your diagnosis or anything else?
So, one thing that stands out to me is the developing pattern of direct payback, right? That Martin kid got Keith in trouble and a beating, so Keith beat him back. The bully tried to drown him at the lake, so Keith tried to drown him back. His brother killed the crow, so Keith destroyed his models and his toys. And so that vindictiveness, coupled with, the other two major red flags of torturing animals and starting fires, paints a pretty scary future for young Keith. I think we're solidly into conduct disorder at this point.
It's interesting that you saw that pattern because that didn't stand out to me. It does now that you say that, because we will see when he starts murdering that there is very much a payback element.
Right, like an eye for an eye. You did this,
sort
I
of
do that.
thing. Like in his mind, justification for what he's doing.
Right.
Yeah.
So that started
they
pretty
had it
young.
Coming. Yeah. I didn't see anywhere about urinating the bed. Now, we know the dark triad is a theory that has been shot down by many people, but it's still a theory.
Right.
And I still think it holds something.
And I mean, we got 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
Plus some other things thrown on top.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like definitely the animal cruelty is the biggest red flag of everything. I, too, like fire.
Yeah, I mean, some of the fire stuff is like stupid boys being stupid boys. Not all of it, obviously.
I've never tried to light something on fire that was not supposed to be on fire.
Sure.
So that's kind of where the differences might lie. But anyways, yeah, that's all we're going to do today. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I do know a bit about this case. So I am excited to get into all the fun twists and turns it's going to take.
And I have to finish the book.
Yes.
But I will, now that I'm pot committed, because we've recorded this first one.
Right. And I'm going to release it.
Yeah. So therefore, we do not like to have more than a week between part 1, 2, 3, 4, etc.
Yes.
But unfortunately, I don't know how many parts this is going to be.
That's okay.
So,
but we're back, people. At least we're trying.
Yes. All right. Well, be safe. Hopefully you did not light yourself on fire 4th of July.
Or blow up a Jeep.
If you were in America.
Correct.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.